Long before empires collapse, they yawn, they sigh, they turn down the lamps, convinced tomorrow will arrive unchanged, unaware history prefers quiet endings over dramatic finales without warning or mercy. Before you drift any deeper, if this quiet helps you feel safe tonight, you're welcome to stay with us. Subscribing softly keeps this place gentle and lets these nights continue. Now, rest. It is night in Rome, sometime around the year 300 AD. Not the kind of night that announces itself. No storms, no omens scribbled across the sky. Just darkness settling gently, like it has done 1,000 times before. The kind of darkness people trust. Oil lamps flicker along narrow stone streets, their light weak but familiar. Shadows stretch and shrink as people pass by wrapped in wool, tired from ordinary days. Somewhere a door closes. Somewhere else a laugh fades too quickly, as if it realized it was being too loud. Rome is winding down, folding itself into sleep. The stones beneath your feet are smooth, worn down by centuries of sandals, carts, soldiers, slaves, senators, everyone walking as if this city were eternal, which of course everyone believes it is. Empires don't usually die in the imagination of those living inside them. They age quietly. They get comfortable. They yawn. A Roman citizen lies down tonight with a simple assumption. Tomorrow will look like today. Markets will open, taxes will be collected, the empire will continue doing empire things. It has survived bad emperors, mad emperors, too many emperors, and emperors who lasted shorter than the bread they promised. This feels manageable. Rome always manages. And so people sleep. There are guards posted along the streets, their footsteps echoing softly between stone walls. The sound travels farther at night when the city holds its breath. A rhythm forms, step, pause, step, steady, almost comforting. The guards are doing their jobs, though not with the fire of old legends. They are not thinking about glory. They are thinking about warmth, about how long until their shift ends, about whether the wine they left at home will still be there when they return. They do not sense history approaching. History rarely wears armor. It prefers patience. Above them, the sky is calm. No comets, no divine warnings. The gods, if they are watching, are quiet tonight, which feels appropriate. This is not the sort of night that demands attention. This is a night that slips by unnoticed, like a deep breath taken without realizing it might be the last calm one for a very long time. Inside their homes, Romans drift into sleep surrounded by the reassuring weight of routine. They have lived their entire lives under the idea of Rome. Rome feeds them, Rome protects them. Rome defines time itself. Even when things go wrong, and they often do, Rome remains. Bruised, maybe, annoyed, temporarily embarrassed, but never fragile. That is the most dangerous belief of all. There is no thunder announcing the future, no voice whispering, "Pay attention," no prophecy nailed to a door. Just silence, thick and comfortable, the kind that makes people feel safe enough to stop asking questions. Because history, despite what we like to imagine, rarely ends with a dramatic sound. No explosion, no final scream. It usually begins its work during moments like this, when everyone agrees that nothing is wrong, when stability feels boring, when peace feels earned. Rome, tonight, feels earned. The empire has been through chaos before, civil wars, economic collapse. emperors assassinated faster than they could be officially named. And yet, here it is, still standing, still breathing, still convinced it has learned its lesson. There is a quiet pride in that confidence and a quiet irony, too. Rome believes it has already survived its worst days. That belief makes the present feel like a reward. People love rewards. They relax into them. Somewhere, a senator sleeps under heavy blankets, dreaming not of politics but of his villa, of warm baths and quiet mornings. Somewhere else, a merchant counts imaginary coins in his dreams, reassured that trade will always find a way back to Rome. Somewhere else, far less comfortable, a laborer sleeps, because exhaustion leaves no room for doubt. All of them share the same unspoken thought. Tomorrow will come, and Rome will still be Rome. It sounds reasonable, sensible even. The streets remain calm, no riots, no fires, no panic. The city has had those before, and this night is not one of them. This night is ordinary. And that ordinariness is precisely what makes it unsettling, though no one feels that yet, because decline does not usually announce itself as decline. It disguises itself as rest. Rome is resting tonight. The empire has grown so vast that it no longer feels the edges of itself. Problems on the borders feel distant, theoretical. Bureaucracy hums along out of habit rather than belief. Power still exists, but it is heavier now, slower to move, like an old body that remembers strength but avoids sudden motions. And still, the lamps flicker, the guards walk, the city sleeps. There is a subtle arrogance in that sleep, though no one would call it that. It feels more like trust. Trust in systems, trust in tradition, trust in the idea that because something has always been there, it will continue to be there. Rome has mistaken longevity for immortality. A fair mistake. Many do. If you were standing there that night, watching the city breathe in the dark, you would see nothing unusual. That is the trick. History does not glow when it turns a corner. It does not knock before entering. It waits until you are comfortable enough to stop watching. Rome is very comfortable. No thunder, no bad dreams shared at breakfast the next morning. Just an empire going to bed, convinced that tomorrow is guaranteed. That belief settles over the city like a blanket, warm, familiar, and quietly suffocating. And this is how it always begins. Not with fear, but with reassurance. Not with chaos, but with calm. Not with collapse, but with the confidence that collapse is no longer possible. Rome sleeps well tonight. History does not need to wake it. Rome believed. It had won forever. Morning comes to Rome, softly, without drama. The city wakes the way it always does, slowly, confidently, as if the future has already signed an agreement not to surprise anyone. After all, Rome has been through worse, much worse, and it is still here. That fact alone feels like proof. The 3rd century had been brutal. Emperors rose and fell so quickly that even history struggled to keep up. Borders burned. Coins lost their value. Loyalty became a temporary condition. For a while, it genuinely looked like Rome might tear itself apart from the inside. No barbarians required. And yet, somehow, Against the odds, and perhaps against common sense, the empire endured. So when the dust finally settled, when the roads were quiet again, and the taxes began flowing with something resembling predictability, Rome drew a simple conclusion. We survived. And survival, in Rome's mind, meant victory. The empire still stands. That is the headline. Everything else feels like footnotes. The legions still march. Their armor still catches the sun. Their standards still rise above camps like promises made of metal and tradition. The army may be stretched thinner than before, loyalty now tied more closely to pay than to pride, but from a distance it looks the same. And distance is how Rome prefers to look at its problems. The emperors are still there too. In fact, there are quite a few of them depending on how you count. Augustus in spirit multiplied in practice, tetrarchs, Caesars, Augusti. Titles layered over titles, in an effort to make chaos look organized. It is complicated, but complicated things often feel sophisticated, and sophistication feels like control. From the outside, Rome appears stabilized. From the inside, Rome feels relieved. Relief is a dangerous emotion for an empire. The people begin to say it out loud now, though not in those exact words. The worst is over. We've seen the bottom. Rome always finds a way. These phrases float through markets and bathhouses, through private conversations and public speeches. They sound reasonable. They sound earned. They sound final. Rome has mistaken endurance for invincibility. The elite are especially convinced. Senators and administrators walk through marble halls, rebuilt after chaos, pleased that the walls are standing straight again. Reforms have been made, systems adjusted. Problems, they believe, have been addressed. There is a deep satisfaction in believing that a crisis has taught you everything it possibly can. That belief is comforting. It is also deeply misleading. There is a particular kind of arrogance that comes not from never falling, but from falling and standing back up. Rome now wears that arrogance quietly, like an old scar it occasionally shows off. Look, it says to itself, even when we almost collapsed, we didn't. And so the question shifts subtly but decisively from can Rome survive to what could possibly threaten us now. That question is rarely spoken aloud. It doesn't need to be. It hangs in the air unchallenged, like an assumption everyone agrees not to examine too closely. The empire is simply too large, too old, too embedded in the world to imagine an ending. Rome is the world, at least in its own imagination. How does the world die? It's almost funny, in a quiet, historical way. Rome's size becomes its shield, not in reality, but in perception. An empire this vast feels permanent by default. Problems feel local, crises feel temporary, decline feels theoretical. When something goes wrong in one corner, another corner is doing just fine. And that balance creates the illusion of health. The empire is not thriving everywhere, but it doesn't need to. It only needs to look intact from the center. And from the center, everything looks manageable. This is where confidence hardens into complacency. The memory of crisis fades quickly when peace returns. Humans are remarkably good at forgetting pain once it stops demanding attention. Rome remembers the 3rd century the way people remember illness. Vaguely, selectively, proud of having recovered and uninterested in lingering symptoms. There is little appetite for uncomfortable questions now. The empire has earned rest, earned pride, earned the right not to worry so much. After all, what is left to fear? The barbarians beyond the borders are still there, of course, but they always have been. Rome has defeated them before, bought them off, absorbed them, turned them into soldiers, settlers, taxpayers. They are a known problem, and known problems feel smaller than unknown ones. Internal conflict managed, the economy stabilized more or less, the gods still receiving sacrifices, the army still loyal enough, the bureaucracy endless but reliable. Everything essential appears to be in place. Rome does not notice that good enough has quietly replaced strong. This is not a loud arrogance. It is not boastful. It is softer than that. Rome's confidence takes the form of assumptions, deep, unspoken, rarely challenged. The assumption that tomorrow will resemble today, that systems will correct themselves, that survival once guarantees survival again. History does not share that assumption. But Rome isn't listening to history. Rome is listening to itself. There is a subtle humor in how convinced the empire becomes of its own permanence. Rome tells stories about its past with reverence, about its future with certainty. The present feels like proof that the story will simply continue, chapter after chapter, indefinitely. Empires love continuity. It makes them feel immortal. Even the cracks begin to feel ordinary. Corruption is no longer shocking, it is administrative. Political maneuvering is expected, almost comforting in its familiarity. Loyalty shifts, but within acceptable parameters. Nothing feels urgent enough to demand real change. And urgency is the only thing that ever forces empires to evolve. Rome has lost its sense of urgency. The people at the top genuinely believe they have reached a stable configuration, a version of Rome that can last forever with minor adjustments. They do not see themselves as standing at a turning point. They see themselves as standing at a plateau. From a plateau, the view feels endless. This is where the empire becomes most vulnerable, not when it is weak, but when it believes weakness has been permanently dealt with. Rome's greatest enemy at this moment is not an army or an invasion or a rebellion. It is the quiet, collective thought, "We made it." That thought settles into policy, into habit, into how decisions are delayed rather than made. Why rush? Why panic? Why rethink fundamentals when the structure is still standing? Rome does not realize that structures can stand long after they stop being sound. There is a faint irony in the fact that the empire's survival becomes its excuse not to look too closely at itself. Crisis forced adaptation. Stability rewards denial. Rome chooses comfort, not because it is foolish, but because it feels deserved. And deserved comfort is hard to argue against. So the empire moves forward with confidence, measured, calm, slightly smug, not loudly, not foolishly, just assured enough to stop being careful. Rome has crossed the invisible line where caution begins to feel unnecessary. The city still wakes each morning to the same rhythms. Markets open, soldiers drill, officials sign documents. Life continues with reassuring regularity. To most people, this feels like success. And in a way, it is. But success, when misunderstood, can be more dangerous than failure. Rome believes it has won a war that history has not finished fighting. And that belief, quiet, widespread, deeply comforting, settles over the empire like a crown made of assumptions, heavy, glittering, and impossible to remove once worn too long. The worst, Rome thinks, is behind it. History, as always, remains patient. An empire too vast to feel its own pain. Rome is enormous now, not just in the way maps show size, with borders stretching confidently across parchment, but in a deeper, more dangerous way. The empire has grown so wide that it no longer feels itself as a single body. Sensation takes too long to travel. Pain, by the time it arrives, has already been explained away. From Britain's wet edges to the heat of Syria, from the forests of Germania to the sands of Africa, Rome exists everywhere, and therefore nowhere all at once. Distance dulls urgency. By the time a problem reaches the center, it arrives as paperwork, stripped of blood, reduced to numbers and phrases like temporary instability or localized disruption. No one is lying. That is the unsettling part. The governors do not see the borders, they see reports, they see budgets, they see requests written in careful language that makes desperation sound administrative. A crumbling frontier becomes a line item. A restless population becomes a statistical fluctuation. Rome has mastered the art of abstraction, and abstraction is wonderfully quiet. The generals, for their part, understand the borders, but not Rome. They know the land, the enemy, the logistics of survival at the edge of the world. They do not know the soul of the empire anymore. Their loyalty is practical, conditional. Rome pays, Rome commands, Rome delays, Rome negotiates. It works, for now. And the people in the city, the vast majority who will never see a frontier, are thinking about tomorrow, about bread, about rent, about surviving the week. Empires are heavy things, and they rest most heavily on those who have the least interest in their long-term destiny. The average Roman citizen does not feel decline. He feels fatigue. That fatigue has become normal. Rome's systems still function. Taxes are collected, laws are enforced, messages travel, armies move. On the surface, everything appears to be doing exactly what it was designed to do. The machine hums along steady and dependable. And that is precisely the problem. The empire is no longer driven by intention. It is driven by momentum. Rome continues because it has always continued. The bureaucracy does not ask why anymore. It asks how much, how soon, and who signs this. There is something eerily impressive about how smoothly a tired system can operate. Officials show up each morning, wrap themselves in routine, and perform their duties with practiced efficiency. They are not corrupt in dramatic ways. They are not incompetent. They are simply exhausted in a manner that has been institutionalized. Rome is now running on habit. This is where scale becomes dangerous. In a smaller state, cracks are visible. You hear them. You feel them underfoot. In an empire this large, cracks disappear into distance. Problems are spread thin, diluted across regions, cultures, and languages. No single issue ever feels catastrophic enough to demand radical change. There is always somewhere else that is doing fine. If a border weakens, another holds. If a province falters, another prospers. The empire balances itself just enough to remain upright, like a body compensating for pain by shifting weight, slowly, unconsciously, damaging itself further in the process. Rome does not collapse under pressure. It adapts to pressure in ways that hide the damage. The center feels stable because instability is outsourced. In Rome itself, life continues with a reassuring sameness. The streets are busy. The baths are full. The courts are loud. From the inside, the empire feels permanent, because permanence is what daily routine teaches people to expect. You wake up, you work, you sleep, tomorrow repeats. The repetition becomes evidence. No one notices that repetition is not the same as health. The empire's leaders speak in confident tones, not because they are confident, but because uncertainty feels irresponsible. They reassure not to deceive, but to maintain order. Order has become the highest value. Not justice, not strength. Order. Order is easier to maintain than vitality. When something breaks, it is patched. When a reform fails, it is revised, renamed, resubmitted. The process matters more than the outcome. Rome has become very good at continuing and very bad at listening. There is a quiet irony here. Rome's greatest achievement, its scale, its complexity, its reach, is what prevents it from feeling pain clearly enough to respond. Nerves are overloaded. Signals arrive too late. By the time the center reacts, the edges have already adapted in their own ways. Often, those adaptations involve compromise. Rome does not notice when compromise becomes the norm. The comparison is uncomfortable but fitting. The empire now resembles a person who is deeply tired but still functional. They wake up every morning, get dressed, go to work, smile at the right moments, complete the necessary tasks. From the outside, they look fine, responsible, reliable. Inside, everything is heavy. They tell themselves they just need rest, a vacation, a slower week. Once this busy period passes, things will feel better. They have been telling themselves this for years. Rome tells itself the same story. The empire keeps moving forward not because it is energized, but because stopping feels impossible. There is too much to maintain, too many expectations, too many systems dependent on continued motion. Momentum becomes obligation, and obligation becomes identity. This is why warnings do not land. This is why reform feels cosmetic. The empire is too large to stop and too tired to sprint. It exists in a state of controlled exhaustion where everything works just well enough to avoid alarm. Everything still works. And that is exactly the problem. When systems fail loudly, people act. When they fail quietly, people adjust. Rome is adjusting. The adjustments are subtle, slightly lower standards, slightly delayed responses, slightly more reliance on local solutions, slightly less belief that the center knows best. None of this feels like collapse. It feels like realism. Rome is becoming practical at the cost of coherence. The officials at the center assume the empire is under control because the paperwork flows. The generals assume the empire is stable because orders still arrive. The people assume Rome endures because life continues. Each group sees a different slice of the whole, and each slice looks acceptable. No one sees the full picture anymore. Scale has fragmented perception. Rome has become a collection of functioning parts rather than a living whole, and living things, when they lose cohesion, do not die immediately. They fade, they compensate, they continue, until one day they cannot. But that day feels distant, hypothetical, almost rude to bring up in polite conversation. After all, Rome is still here. That thought carries enormous weight. It silences doubt. It reframes concern as pessimism. Anyone who questions the empire's trajectory sounds dramatic, ungrateful, or naive. Rome survived chaos. Who are you to worry now? This is how confidence turns into pressure. So the machine runs, the routines repeat. The empire stretches on, impressive and exhausted, stable and strained. It does not feel like a patient in crisis. It feels like someone pushing through another long week, telling themselves they'll rest later. Later becomes the default answer to every problem. Later, borders will be strengthened. Later, corruption will be addressed. Later, loyalty will be reinforced. Later, the system will be streamlined. Later is a comforting word. It implies time. Rome assumes it has plenty. The unsettling truth is that Rome's pain has not disappeared. It has just become diffused, spread across provinces, absorbed by populations, normalized into daily life. The empire no longer screams when something is wrong. It sighs. And sighs are easy to ignore. From the center, Rome looks calm. From the edges, Rome looks distant. From within, Rome feels tired but functional. No single perspective sounds an alarm loud enough to wake the whole. This is the danger of being too large to listen to yourself. Rome is not collapsing. It is not even obviously declining. It is simply continuing without clarity, moving forward without reflection, confident enough to stop questioning what forward actually means. Everything still works. And somewhere beneath that reassuring fact, something essential is quietly wearing down, unnoticed, unaddressed, waiting for a moment when still working will no longer be enough. Guarding an empire they no longer believed in. The borders are quiet now, not peaceful, quiet. And there is a difference the soldiers understand instinctively, even if the empire refuses to name it. Along the edges of Rome's vast world, men stand watch in the dark. They wear Roman armor, carry Roman weapons, follow Roman commands. From a distance, it looks reassuring. The frontier is guarded, the line is held. Civilization stands firm against the unknown. Up close, the picture changes. These soldiers are not dreaming of triumph. They are not imagining their names carved into stone, remembered by future generations. Glory has become a distant concept, like an old story told too many times to feel real. They fight for their pay, if it arrives, for rations, if they are sufficient, for survival, because turning away is not an option that exists for them. This is not cowardice. It is clarity. The Roman army still functions, just as the empire does. Orders are obeyed, formations hold, camps are built and dismantled with mechanical precision. But belief, the dangerous, powerful belief that once made legions unstoppable, has thinned. What remains is professionalism without passion. And professionalism can only go so far. Many of these soldiers are not Roman in the way the word once meant. They are recruits from the provinces, from borderlands, from places Rome absorbed rather than inspired. They serve because service is a contract, not a calling. Rome has become an employer, not an idea. It pays in coin, land, or promises. Sometimes it pays late, sometimes not at all. The soldiers notice. They also notice the silence beyond the border, the absence of chaos, the lack of constant pressure. Enemies who once tested Rome openly now wait, watch, learn. Silence stretches across forests and plains in a way that feels intentional. Veteran soldiers know this kind of quiet. It is not comforting. At night, fires burn low, conversations are shorter, jokes sound forced. The men on watch scan the darkness not with fear but with expectation. Something will happen. They do not know when. They only know that nothing lasts like this forever. The guards understand what the Empire does not want to admit. Borders do not stay quiet by accident. From the safety of the center, reports describe stable frontiers and reduced hostilities. The language is soothing, efficient. Rome interprets silence as success. Fewer battles mean fewer problems. Fewer problems mean things are working. The men holding the line hear the same words and think something very different. They see supply routes stretching thinner, reinforcements arriving slower, commands delayed by distance and bureaucracy. They see allies who feel less loyal each year, mercenaries who calculate risk instead of pledging allegiance. They see Rome hesitating, negotiating, paying to avoid conflict. They do not see an empire preparing for tomorrow. They see one managing today. There is a quiet, bitter humor among the troops, not the loud laughter of confidence, but the dry, exhausted kind that survives disappointment. They joke about how Rome praises them from afar, how speeches are made in marble halls by men who have never stood in this cold, staring into this darkness. They joke because anger would require belief. The night watch is long, time stretches when nothing happens. That is when thoughts wander, when illusions wear thin. The men standing guard understand something fundamental. If Rome truly believed in its own permanence, it would not be asking them to hold everything together with fewer resources and fading promises. An empire confident in its future does not rely so heavily on men who feel disposable, and yet these men are the last line. They know it. Rome does not like to think about it. The soldiers still fight when they must. They still bleed. They still die. But they no longer frame those deaths as sacrifices for eternity. They are transactions, risks accepted, costs of employment. This shift is subtle, almost invisible from afar, but it is profound. Once, Rome's army believed it was Rome. Now it merely works for it. That distinction changes everything. When loyalty becomes conditional, when obedience replaces devotion, strength becomes fragile. It may look the same on parade, but in moments that matter, when chaos breaks loose, when orders conflict with survival, that missing belief leaves a gap no discipline can fully close. The men on the walls feel the weight of that gap. They also feel how far away Rome has become. Messages take weeks. Decisions take longer. Authority arrives filtered through layers of interpretation. When something goes wrong, responsibility blurs. No one at the center feels the urgency. No one at the edge feels heard. The guards adapt by relying on themselves. Local commanders make quiet choices. Deals are struck. Lines are bent. Rome prefers not to notice. As long as the border holds, how it holds becomes a secondary concern. Stability matters more than purity. This is how empires slowly lose control, without losing the appearance of it. At night, the guards look east, west, north, directions that mean little to men who live at the end of maps. Dawn comes eventually, but without promise. Morning is not hope. It is simply the next shift. The idea that tomorrow will be better feels naive out here. Tomorrow will be heavier, more of the same, less support, more responsibility. The men understand something deeply unsettling. Rome is not preparing for a future. It is stretching a present. And stretching things too far always has consequences. There is a line that circulates quietly among the ranks, half joke, half confession. The empire is defended by men who no longer believe in it. It is said with a shrug, sometimes with a smile. Humor makes truths easier to carry. Dark humor survives where optimism cannot. The soldiers are not plotting rebellion. They are not dreaming of collapse. They simply see clearly. They see that Rome's strength now depends less on vision and more on inertia. That is not something worth believing in. It is something to endure. From the center, the army is still a symbol of power. From the edge, it feels like a holding pattern. Rome believes the guards are watching the darkness for threats. The guards know they are watching Rome for signs it still cares. The silence continues. Too long. Too clean. Rome counts the quiet days as proof of success. The soldiers count them as warnings. No one raises the alarm. There is no mechanism for that kind of honesty. To admit unease would sound like weakness. And weakness is something Rome has trained itself not to hear. So the watch continues. Armor creaks. Torches flicker. Eyes strain into blackness that offers no answers. The men do their jobs because that is what they are paid to do, because it is safer than not doing them, because there is nothing else. They no longer expect the empire to reward them with meaning. And that, more than any enemy beyond the border, is what should worry Rome. An empire can survive external threats for centuries. It struggles far more when the people guarding it stop believing that survival means something more than just getting through another night. The dawn will come, as it always does. But for these men, dawn is not a symbol. It is merely proof that the night has not yet delivered what it has been quietly preparing. Rome sleeps comfortably, trusting its borders to hold. The guards do not share that comfort. They stand there anyway. While Rome slept, the world stayed awake. Rome does not notice when the balance shifts. Centers rarely do. From the inside, the empire still feels like the axis around which everything else turns. Roads lead to Rome. Laws echo Rome. Time itself is counted by Roman names. This belief is old, reinforced by habit, polished by repetition. Rome has been the center for so long that it has stopped checking whether it still is. Outside that center, the world has been paying attention. Beyond the borders, Beyond the polite phrases carved into official reports, things are changing. Quietly, methodically, patiently. The people Rome still insists on calling barbarians no longer fit the word, not because they have become Roman, but because they have learned Rome. They watch, they listen, they adapt. Once, these outsiders were framed as chaos, loud, violent, impulsive, a convenient contrast to Roman order. But chaos does not organize itself for centuries. Chaos does not learn languages, adopt tactics, negotiate treaties, or remember betrayals. What Rome faces now is not noise at the edges, but intelligence. And intelligence does not rush. The tribes beyond the frontiers trade with Rome, serve in its armies, live beside its borders. They learn its strengths, and more importantly, its weaknesses. They learn how Rome responds to pressure, how long it takes to react, how easily it can be distracted by its own internal weight. They notice the same thing the soldiers notice. Rome delays. When Rome was young, it moved decisively. Now it calculates, negotiates, postpones. The barbarians learn that time is no longer Rome's weapon, it is Rome's vulnerability. They also learn that Rome prefers peace, not because it is strong, but because it is tired. This realization spreads slowly, carried not by messengers, but by experience. One border holds with fewer troops. Another is bought off rather than crushed. Another is left quiet simply because responding would require effort. Rome no longer wants to expend. None of this looks like weakness when viewed from the capital. From the outside, it looks like opportunity. Rome believes the world still reacts to it. The world, meanwhile, has begun to move independently. Trade routes shift. Alliances form without Roman involvement. Power reorganizes itself in ways that do not ask permission. Rome hears about these changes late, if at all, filtered through layers of reassurance. Reports emphasize calm, stability, control. Reality is less tidy. The barbarians are no longer knocking at the gates because they are busy mapping them, understanding how often they are guarded. By whom? With what level of commitment? They know which borders matter to Rome and which ones Rome hopes no one will test. They also know Rome's greatest fear: disruption. An empire that fears disruption can be steered. Rome does not feel surrounded. That would imply danger. Instead, it feels watched, but only in the faintest sense, like a pressure in the room that cannot be explained. Something is off. Conversations feel slightly rehearsed. Silence lingers longer than expected. But Rome has learned to ignore discomfort. Discomfort rarely fits into official categories. Inside the empire, people still debate Roman problems as if Rome is the only actor that matters. They argue about emperors, reforms, taxes, succession. They assume the rest of the world is static, waiting patiently for Rome to resolve its internal questions. The rest of the world does not share that patience. While Rome reorganizes itself endlessly, others are organizing around Rome. The tribes learn which Roman titles mean power and which are decorative. They learn which promises are kept and which dissolve quietly. They learn that Rome's unity is increasingly symbolic, maintained through language rather than force. They do not need Rome to fall, they only need it to stop moving forward, and Rome has already stopped. There is something deeply unsettling about how calm everything looks. No invasions, no mass uprisings, no dramatic confrontations, just a steady accumulation of knowledge on one side and a steady accumulation of assumptions on the other. Rome assumes that silence means submission. The world assumes Rome is asleep. At night, on the borders, the guards feel it most clearly, the sense that they are not alone in the dark, not threatened exactly, observed. Eyes in the trees, messengers passing quietly, movements that leave no trace but memory. The soldiers report nothing unusual because nothing unusual has happened. That is the brilliance of it. Rome waits for danger to announce itself. The world waits for Rome to finish waiting. The idea that Rome is the center of everything has begun to wobble, not because anyone attacked it directly, but because the world has grown less dependent on it. Power has options now. Rome is one of them, not the only one. This shift is subtle, invisible to those who expect collapse to look dramatic. It does not feel like decline, it feels like irrelevance slowly approaching relevance. Rome is still powerful. That is important. This is not a story of sudden weakness. It is a story of misplaced confidence. Rome believes that being strong is enough. It does not notice that others have learned how to live alongside that strength without being dominated by it. Once, Rome defined the rules. Now it enforces them inconsistently. The barbarians learn this lesson well. They stop reacting emotionally. They stop charging blindly. They stop seeing Rome as an idea and start seeing it as a system. Systems can be studied. Systems can be exploited. Systems can be waited out. Patience becomes the greatest weapon Rome does not know. It is facing. There is a creeping sense on the edges that the future no longer belongs to the empire by default, that Rome's shadow is still long, but no longer endless. People beyond the borders do not speak of Rome with awe anymore. They speak of it with familiarity. Familiarity erodes fear. Rome, meanwhile, continues to believe it is being generous, civilizing, stabilizing. It does not realize that others see its actions as predictable. Predictability is useful to those watching. The empire's responses follow patterns now. Delay, negotiate, pay, postpone, repeat. Rome has turned flexibility into routine and routine into weakness. Still, no one wakes Rome. There is no reason to. Why interrupt an empire while it is making itself easier to understand? The sense of being watched grows, but Rome explains it away. Paranoia, some say. Overthinking, others argue. The world has always looked at Rome. That's what the center attracts. Attention, envy, desire. Rome does not consider that attention has changed shape. It is no longer admiration. It is assessment. The nights feel longer, conversations quieter, decisions slower. Somewhere beyond the borders, plans are being refined that do not require Rome's awareness to succeed. And that is the most unsettling part. Rome is not being challenged. It is being bypassed. No one needs to overthrow the empire. They only need to exist effectively around it. To grow while Rome manages, decline disguised as stability. To wait while Rome sleeps comfortably in its assumptions. Because Rome is asleep, not literally, but strategically. It is dreaming of permanence, while the world practices patience. The key moment is not marked by an event. It is marked by absence, the absence of urgency, the absence of fear, the absence of awareness that the rules have changed. Rome assumes the future will arrive asking permission. It will not. No one sends a warning. No one sounds an alarm. There is no need. Rome is doing exactly what its observers hope it will do. Nothing drastic. The barbarians have stopped being barbarians not because they became civilized, but because they became deliberate. Rome has stopped being deliberate not because it became weak, but because it became comfortable. Comfort is louder than danger and far more effective. As the empire settles deeper into routine, into the belief that its size guarantees its survival, the world around it adjusts quietly. Networks form, strength consolidates, alternatives develop. Rome is no longer the only future people can imagine. That realization does not reach the capital. It does not fit into reports. It does not show up in tax records or military tallies. It exists in the spaces between actions, in the decisions not made, in the patience exercised by those who no longer fear Rome's immediate response. The guards feel it. The traders sense it. The borderlands live it. The center sleeps through it. And that is why no one wakes Rome. Because no one needs to. The world is not waiting for the empire to fall. It is waiting for it to finish, convincing itself that it cannot. Rome dreams of control. The world practices adaptation. And history, as always, prefers the one who stays awake. The last peaceful night. Without tragedy, no warning. Nothing happens. That is the most honest way to describe this night. No banners fall. No gates burn. No messenger rides in breathless panic through the streets of Rome. There is no scream loud enough to wake history, no final mistake dramatic enough to be remembered as the moment everything changed. There is only evening. The sun lowers itself behind familiar rooftops. Shadows lengthen in predictable ways. Shopkeepers close their stalls with the same motions they have used for years. The smell of cooked grain drifts through narrow streets. Children are called inside. Doors are barred, not in fear, but in routine. Rome prepares for sleep like an old city that trusts tomorrow. This is not denial. It is habit. From the outside, it might seem strange that nothing feels urgent, that no one senses how much has already shifted. But urgency requires contrast, and Rome's present looks remarkably similar to its recent past. Yesterday did not end the world. Neither did the day before. So why would tonight? The empire has learned a dangerous lesson. Continuity feels like proof. There are no great events recorded for this night. No historian circles it in red ink centuries later. It will not earn a name. It does not deserve one. It is simply another entry in the long, unbroken line of evenings Rome has known. That is what makes it important. Inside the city, lamps glow softly in windows. Conversations wind down. People speak of ordinary things, prices, rumors, mild complaints about officials who will never hear them. Some laugh, some argue. Most are simply tired. They go to bed believing what they have always believed. Tomorrow will come, and Rome will still be there to receive it. The empire has trained them well. Rome does not feel like it is standing at the edge of anything. It feels settled, heavy, established, the kind of place that survives storms by outlasting them. People do not imagine endings when the middle feels this solid, and Rome feels very much like the middle of the story. There is something quietly cruel about how peaceful this night is. It offers no resistance to complacency. It does not challenge assumptions. It does not disrupt the story Rome tells itself. It confirms everything people want to believe. The streets are calm. The guards walk their routes. The borders, according to reports, remain stable. No alarms reach the capital. No signals demand attention. The empire sleeps, satisfied with the absence of noise. History, of course, does not require noise. The Roman mind has grown accustomed to thinking of catastrophe as something loud. Invasions, revolts, assassinations, sudden collapses that force acknowledgement. Rome watches for those signs and finds none. So it relaxes. This night does not feel like an ending. It feels like a pause between chapters that Rome assumes it already understands. A moment to breathe, to rest, to enjoy the rare sensation of not having to react. Peace has become procedural. In homes across the city, people drift into sleep without anxiety. Dreams are personal, small, disconnected from empire. A better job, a healthier child, a debt resolved. No one dreams of Rome ending. That would feel absurd. Rome has outlived too much to feel fragile now. The irony is almost painful in its softness, because this is the night where nothing happens, where nothing needs to happen. The forces that will shape Rome's future are already in motion, already aligned, already patient. They do not require a signal. They do not need Rome's awareness. They only need Rome to continue being Rome. The empire has reached a point where change no longer needs to announce itself. The trajectory is set by repetition, by the quiet agreement to treat today as proof that tomorrow will behave. This is not the night Rome falls. It is the night Rome confirms it will not move. The bureaucracies hum along even in rest. Papers wait to be signed. Decisions wait to be delayed. Compromises wait to be normalized. Nothing presses hard enough to force reconsideration. And so nothing is reconsidered. The absence of disaster feels like success. The absence of crisis feels like vindication. Rome's belief that it has already survived its worst days is reinforced by the sheer ordinariness of this evening. How could an empire end on a night like this? That question never occurs to anyone. From the edges of the empire, the night feels different, but still not dramatic. Guards stand watch. Fires burn low. Silence stretches. There is tension there, yes, but tension has become familiar enough to feel manageable. No one crosses any lines tonight. No one needs to. The world beyond Rome has learned that patience is more effective than provocation. Rome has learned that quiet is preferable to change. The two lessons fit together too neatly. Inside the city, even those who sense unease struggle to articulate it. There is no language for slow decline that does not sound melodramatic in moments of calm. Better to say nothing. Better to sleep. Rome is very good at sleeping through discomfort. This night feels earned. That is perhaps the most unsettling part. Rome believes it has earned the right to rest, to stop questioning itself so intensely, to enjoy the stability it fought so hard to regain. And in a way, it has. But history does not reward effort with permanence. It only records outcomes. The empire has become addicted to normalcy. It clings to routine not because it is lazy, but because routine has saved it before. When chaos threatened, Rome leaned on structure, repetition, order. Now that chaos has retreated, Rome sees no reason to let go of the habits that carried it through. It does not notice that those habits were meant to be temporary. Tonight, Rome is not making a mistake. It is repeating a pattern. That distinction matters. Mistakes are obvious in hindsight. Patterns feel justified. The night passes with no fanfare. The stars move. Time advances. Nothing demands to be written down. Somewhere a clerk extinguishes a lamp. Somewhere else a guard shifts his weight. Somewhere far beyond the city, people who are not Roman but understand Rome very well continue to watch, to wait, to plan without urgency. There is no conspiracy against Rome. That idea would imply intention. What exists instead is alignment. Circumstances lining up while Rome remains still. The empire does not feel threatened. It feels complete. That feeling is intoxicating. Rome sleeps with the confidence of something that assumes it will wake up unchanged. It assumes that tomorrow's problems will look like yesterday's problems, solvable with the same tools, delayed with the same excuses. It does not imagine a future that requires different thinking. This is how empires drift into irrelevance without ever collapsing, not through violence, but through comfort, not through catastrophe, but through consistency. Tonight, Rome does exactly what it has learned to do best. It continues. And history allows it. There is a quiet, devastating irony in the thought that the last peaceful night does not feel special to those living through it. It never does. Peace only becomes precious after it is gone. Calm only becomes meaningful once it is broken. For Rome, this night is unremarkable. That is why it matters. The empire has crossed into a phase where nothing happening feels like confirmation that everything is fine. It no longer understands that silence can be the loudest signal of all. No one stays awake to question this. There is no need. The world has not demanded it. Rome's citizens sleep. Its leaders rest. Its systems idle but ready. The machine waits for tomorrow, confident that tomorrow will ask no more of it than today did. History does not interrupt this belief, because history does not need climaxes. It does not require drama. It does not depend on moments people recognize as important. History only needs habit. And tonight, Rome is deeply committed to its habits. So the night ends without incident. No tragedy, no revelation, no warning worth remembering. Just the soft passing of hours in a city convinced that endurance equals destiny. Rome sleeps. And in that sleep, it confirms the path it has already chosen, one quiet night at a time. The signs everyone saw, except Rome. The signs are everywhere. That is the problem. They are not hidden. They are not subtle. They do not require special insight or forbidden knowledge. They sit in plain view, woven into daily life so tightly that no one thinks to pull them apart and ask what they mean together. Rome sees them one by one. Rome never sees them as a whole. The economy slows, not collapses, just slows. Prices creep upward in ways people learn to complain about without truly questioning. Coinage feels lighter in the hand, less reliable, but still accepted. Trade continues, just with more friction, more negotiation, more quiet adjustments. Nothing dramatic enough to stop the markets from opening in the morning. So the markets open. Merchants adapt, they always do. They shorten measures, raise prices slightly, offer less while charging the same. Customers grumble, then pay anyway. Life goes on. An economy does not need to feel healthy to function. It only needs to feel familiar. Rome tells itself this is normal. Empires have cycles, growth slows, then it returns. That is how things work. Except this time, growth does not return. It merely pretends to. Wages lag behind costs. Small trades disappear quietly. Wealth pools upward away from visibility into estates and accounts that no longer circulate through the city the way they once did. The system still moves, but the motion feels uneven now, like a wheel that turns but wobbles. People notice. They always notice. They just do not know what to do with the observation. Faith begins to thin, not faith in gods necessarily, but faith in Rome itself, in its fairness, its predictability, its concern. This erosion is quiet, almost polite. No one announces they no longer believe. They simply stop expecting. Expectations shrink. Citizens once took pride in being Roman, not because it was easy, but because it meant something. It came with duties, yes, but also with dignity. Now citizenship feels administrative, a status, a line in a record, useful for taxes, for law, for identity, but hollow. People still call themselves Roman. They just no longer feel it. The idea of shared destiny weakens. Public life becomes transactional. You participate if it benefits you, you withdraw if it does not. Civic spirit does not vanish overnight. It erodes through neglect, like a public building no one bothers to repair because it is still standing. Rome still has citizens. It is running out of Romans. None of this triggers alarm bells. Why would it? The streets are not on fire. The empire has seen worse. There is a collective memory of chaos that makes present discomfort seem mild by comparison. People tell themselves this is just how things are now. And they are busy. That is the cruel joke of it. No one panics because no one has time to. Life demands attention. Survival is distracting. When you are focused on making it through the day, abstract ideas like imperial decline feel indulgent. Rome benefits from this distraction. The signs stack up quietly. Public trust fades. Officials are assumed to be self-interested by default. Laws are followed not out of respect but out of calculation. Enforcement replaces legitimacy. Order remains, but it feels imposed rather than shared. Still, no one uses the word collapse. Collapse sounds dramatic. Collapse suggests a moment, an event, a failure you can point to and say there. That's when it happened. Rome has nothing like that. What it has instead is a long, dull unraveling that never quite demands full attention. The economy is not broken, it is tired. The people are not rebellious, they are disengaged. The system is not failing, it is hollowing out. These distinctions matter to historians. They are invisible to those living inside them. Rome's leaders see the same signs as everyone else. They read the reports, hear the complaints, notice the tensions, but each sign arrives isolated, stripped of context. An economic issue here, a social concern there, a moral panic somewhere else. Nothing connects unless someone connects it. And connecting it would be inconvenient. Because if these signs are connected, they point to something uncomfortable. Rome is not facing a series of problems. It is experiencing a shift, a change in what it is and how people relate to it. That kind of realization demands more than policy adjustments. It demands rethinking the story Rome tells about itself. No one wants that responsibility. So instead, the signs are managed, addressed individually, smoothed over with rhetoric and routine. The machine continues because stopping it to ask questions would cause disruption. And Rome has learned to fear disruption more than decay. The irony deepens. The absence of panic becomes proof that panic is unnecessary. People complain constantly, but complaining has replaced action. It vents pressure without creating movement. Rome allows complaints. It even expects them. Complaints make people feel heard without changing anything. This is stability, Roman style. Civic participation shrinks. Fewer people feel invested in public outcomes. Why should they? Decisions feel distant. Consequences feel uneven. The empire feels less like a shared project and more like a structure imposed from above. Rome still calls this order. Those who benefit from the system remain vocal in its defense. Those who do not adapt by disengaging. The gap widens quietly. Not enough to provoke revolt, just enough to drain energy. Energy matters more than loyalty. The signs show up in language too. People speak differently about Rome now. Less reverence, more sarcasm, more resignation. The jokes sharpen, the humor turns dry. When humor becomes the primary way people process disappointment, something important has already been lost. No one panics. Everyone is too busy. Busy surviving. Busy adjusting. Busy lowering expectations. Just enough to keep functioning. Rome does not see danger in this. From its perspective, adaptability is strength. People are resilient. The system bends without breaking. That seems like success. What Rome misses is that resilience has limits. And when resilience is constantly required, it turns into exhaustion. Exhausted societies do not rebel loudly, they withdraw. Trust erodes first, then participation, then belief. By the time order fails, the emotional connection that once held everything together is long gone. Rome assumes that because laws are enforced, they are respected. Because taxes are paid, the system is accepted. Because life continues, the empire is stable. These assumptions hold until they don't. The signs continue to accumulate. Fewer volunteers, more mercenaries, less pride in service, more focus on personal survival than collective future. None of this feels revolutionary. It feels practical. Rome is becoming practical at the cost of meaning. The most unsettling part is how normal it all feels. People adapt astonishingly well to slow decline. They incorporate it into routine. They adjust expectations downward and call it realism. Rome mistakes this for maturity. No one writes a manifesto declaring the end of civic spirit. It simply stops being taught, stops being rewarded, stops being modeled. Children grow up learning how to navigate the system, not how to believe in it. The future adjusts accordingly. Rome's administrators continue to manage symptoms. Economic reforms here, moral speeches there. None of it addresses the core issue. People no longer feel that Rome belongs to them. And yet, life continues. That continuity is Rome's greatest illusion. It hides the fact that the empire is no longer held together by shared belief, but by habit and enforcement. These can maintain order for a long time. They cannot inspire renewal, but renewal is not on the agenda. The signs remain visible, obvious even. Everyone sees them in their own way. No one connects them into a single story, because that story would be too heavy to carry while trying to live an ordinary life. Rome benefits from the fragmentation of awareness. And so the days pass. Work is done. Taxes collected. Complaints voiced. Jokes shared. People adapt to less while telling themselves it is temporary. The empire does not collapse. It settles. This is the phase where historians later argue about dates and definitions. When did Rome truly begin to fall? There is no satisfying answer because nothing definitive happens. There is only a gradual loss of cohesion that feels at the time like adjustment. Rome calls it stability. The signs keep coming. Rome keeps seeing them. Rome keeps not seeing what they add up to. And as long as everyone remains busy working, busy surviving, busy adjusting, there is no space left for panic or for change. Rome does not fall because people stop caring. It weakens because caring becomes too expensive. By the time anyone is free enough to panic, the structure they might have tried to save no longer feels like it belongs to them. But that realization is still ahead. For now, the signs are everywhere, and Rome, surrounded by them, continues to look straight past. Rome did not fall, Rome drifted away. There is no date you can circle and call the end. No final sunrise over a ruined city. No moment when Rome collectively realizes that something essential has left and will not return. History does not grant Rome that clarity. It would be too kind. Instead, Rome drifts. Slowly, quietly, almost politely. The city remains. The stones do not vanish. The roads still lead somewhere. The buildings stand with the stubborn confidence of things built to outlast memory. From a distance, Rome still looks like Rome. Travelers still arrive. Officials still speak its name with authority. The world still uses its language, its laws, its measurements. Everything that can be counted is still there. What is missing is harder to point to. There is no day when people wake up and say, "Today, Rome is no longer Rome." That would require awareness, and awareness is the one thing Rome has been losing steadily. Instead, people adjust to subtle absences, a ceremony that feels less meaningful than it used to, a title that carries less weight, a law that commands compliance but not respect. These changes do not feel like loss. They feel like aging. Rome does not collapse under force. It does not shatter. It thins. The identity that once held everything together stretches until it becomes transparent, then quietly slips away. Citizens continue their lives inside structures that look familiar, using words that sound the same, following rituals that resemble tradition. But the emotional core, the sense that Rome is a shared idea worth believing in, has begun to fade. No one announces this. It would sound melodramatic. Instead, Rome becomes a place people live in rather than belong to. The city still has power, but it is procedural. Authority exists, but it feels inherited rather than earned. The past does much of the heavy lifting now. Rome relies on memory the way old people rely on stories to remind themselves who they used to be. That memory is impressive. It is also heavy. The empire's institutions persist long after their purpose has thinned. Offices are held, titles are passed down, protocols are followed. But the energy that once justified them is gone. Rome continues because it has always continued. This is not failure in the dramatic sense. It is inertia. The people sense it even if they cannot articulate it. There is less pride in saying, "I am Roman now," more calculation, more detachment. Identity becomes practical rather than emotional. Rome does not disappear. It becomes background. And background things are easy to ignore. The world adjusts accordingly. Rome is still consulted but not deferred to automatically. Its approval matters but not decisively. Its threats are weighed rather than feared. Its promises are considered rather than trusted. None of this is sudden. That is why it works. Rome loses its centrality without ever losing its visibility. It remains present everywhere, yet essential nowhere. The empire has become a reference point, not a foundation. That is a difficult thing to mourn, because nothing has been taken away. Nothing has been destroyed. And yet something vital is gone. The soul of Rome, if such a thing can be said to exist, does not leave in anger. It does not storm out. It simply grows quieter, less involved, less convincing. It stops demanding belief and settles for acknowledgement. People still obey Rome. They just no longer feel defined by it. The tone of the city changes. Conversations feel less hopeful, more practical. Ambition narrows. Dreams shrink to manageable size. The future is no longer imagined as something Rome will shape, but something individuals must survive. This is not despair. It is resignation. Rome becomes very good at managing decline without naming it. Administrators continue their work. Leaders issue statements. Reforms are proposed, debated, implemented, forgotten. None of them restore what has been lost, because none of them address it directly. You cannot legislate belief back into existence. The city still hosts ceremonies that echo past greatness. Processions move through streets that remember louder footsteps. People watch, applaud politely, and return to their lives unchanged. The spectacle remains, but the magic is gone. Rome performs Rome for itself. There is a sadness in that performance, even if no one admits it. A sense of saying goodbye without knowing who is leaving. The empire has become a ghost of its former self, while still fully alive. This is the strangest kind of ending. One where nothing ends. Rome does not fall in love with a new identity. It does not reinvent itself. It simply becomes less certain of who it is. The edges blur, the center weakens, the narrative loses coherence, and yet the city remains functional. That functionality delays mourning. People tell themselves that as long as things work, everything is fine. But meaning is not required for systems to function, only for people to care deeply about them. Rome still commands obedience. It no longer commands devotion. There is a quiet farewell happening in this phase, though no one gathers to witness it. The farewell of shared purpose, of collective imagination, of the idea that Rome is not just where you live, but who you are. The city stands as it always has, but it feels different, less alive, more preserved, like a monument that people still inhabit. Time moves on gently, without ceremony. Generations grow up knowing only this version of Rome, stable, dull, authoritative, uninspiring. They do not miss what they never had. To them, this is normal. That may be the most devastating part. Rome's decline is not tragic in the classical sense. It is not heroic. It does not inspire songs. It inspires footnotes, long explanations, debates about definitions. Was Rome still Rome at this point? What does fall even mean? Can something end without ending? Historians argue because Rome never gives them a clear answer. The empire does not die, it disperses. Its identity fragments into traditions, laws, languages, institutions that outlive the political structure itself. Rome survives everywhere except as a unified soul. The city remains, but it feels hollowed out, not destroyed, not ruined, just lighter, less anchored. Walking through Rome now feels like visiting someone you used to know very well. They recognize you. You recognize them. The connection is still there technically, but the conversation no longer flows. Something shared has quietly slipped away. The farewell is ongoing, endless, unmarked. There is no villain to blame, no single decision that caused this. Rome drifted because drifting was easier than confronting change, because comfort was chosen over renewal, because continuity was mistaken for immortality. And now, Rome exists in a long twilight, still impressive, still influential, still standing, but no longer certain of why. The city does not weep for itself. It does not rage. It simply continues, increasingly out of sync with the world around it. A former center that still believes the map revolves around it, even as the lines quietly redraw themselves. This is not the fall of Rome. This is the fading of Rome. A slow, almost gentle goodbye that no one officially acknowledges. A loss without destruction. A departure without movement. The city is still there, the soul is not. And that absence stretches on, unmarked by dates or declarations, felt only in the quiet sense that something once essential has gone somewhere history does not bother to name. Rome drifts, and the world moves on around it, softly, respectfully, without stopping to say farewell. Are we sleeping too? A question left unanswered. Rome does not get the last word. History rarely allows that. What remains, after the drifting and the fading and the long goodbye, no one officially marked, is not a conclusion, but a silence. a pause that stretches forward, asking nothing directly, offering no lessons, neatly packaged for comfort. It would be easy, tempting even, to turn Rome into a warning, to pull meaning from its slow unraveling and arrange it into something instructive. Empires fall when they grow complacent. Societies decay when citizens disengage. Power fades when belief disappears. All of that might be true. But history is not a classroom, and Rome is not a case study designed for moral clarity. Rome was lived in, endured, adapted to. Most of the people inside it never thought they were standing inside a lesson at all. They thought they were standing inside life. That is what makes the question uncomfortable, because Rome did not look like an ending while it was happening. It looked like continuity, like routine, like systems functioning just well enough to avoid alarm. It looked like people getting up, going to work, complaining quietly, adjusting expectations, and going back to sleep. It looked ordinary, which raises the question that lingers long after the stones stop speaking. Are we sleeping too? Not in the literal sense, not in ignorance necessarily. Rome was not ignorant. It had information, experts, institutions, debates. It discussed itself endlessly. It analyzed its problems with impressive sophistication. What Rome lacked was not knowledge. It lacked urgency. Rome understood many of the forces shaping its decline. It simply learned to live with them, to normalize them, to treat them as background noise rather than signals demanding transformation. That is a subtle difference, but a decisive one. When problems arrive slowly, people adapt. When they adapt long enough, adaptation feels like stability. When stability feels earned, questioning it feels unnecessary, even irresponsible. Rome reached that point quietly. No one flipped a switch from awareness to denial. There was no moment when Rome collectively decided to stop paying attention. Attention just became too expensive, emotionally, politically, personally. Caring deeply requires energy. Rome was tired. So it chose management over meaning, continuity over renewal, comfort over confrontation. None of these choices were dramatic. That is why they worked. And that is why the question does not stay safely in the past. Because Rome's story is unsettling not because it is unique, but because it is familiar. It does not rely on villains or catastrophes. It relies on habits, on routines, on the quiet agreement to postpone difficult conversations in favor of getting through another day. History does not repeat itself, but it does echo, softly, persistently, in patterns that feel recognizable without being identical. Rome slept well because nothing demanded it wake up. That is the part people miss. There was no single enemy who forced Rome into slumber. No conspiracy powerful enough to silence it. Rome slept because it believed rest was deserved, because vigilance felt exhausting, because the world had not yet made itself loud enough to interrupt routine, and the world did not need to. It waited. This is where the question turns inward, not accusatory, not dramatic, just quietly present. Are we mistaking motion for progress? Are we confusing familiarity with health? Are we assuming that because systems still function, they still deserve belief? These are not questions with satisfying answers. They are questions that resist resolution, questions that linger precisely because resolving them would require discomfort. Rome would have found them uncomfortable. The people of Rome did not think of themselves as living at the edge of history. They thought of themselves as living after history's worst moments, as survivors, as inheritors of stability. That self-image shaped every choice that followed. Survivors do not expect endings. They expect recovery. Rome never fully realized that survival is not the same as renewal. The empire believed it had already paid its price. That belief insulated it from the possibility that more would be asked. History, however, does not operate on fairness. It does not stop demanding adaptation simply because something has endured long enough. Rome's greatest mistake, if it can be called a mistake, was assuming that having survived once meant it understood survival forever. That assumption is comforting. It is also dangerous. There is no clear line separating awareness from sleep, no moment when eyes close and consciousness fades. Sleep arrives gradually through repetition, through reassurance, through the quiet absence of immediate threat. Rome slept with its eyes open. And perhaps that is why the question matters more than any answer. Because the most unsettling possibility is not that Rome fell, but that it never felt like falling at all. That decline felt like adjustment. That loss felt like maturity. That the fading of meaning felt like realism. Rome did not scream. It sighed. It did not collapse. It drifted. And drift is easy to mistake for control, right up until direction no longer belongs to you. The silence at the end of Rome's story is not empty. It is full of things left unsaid, of conversations postponed too long, of moments when awareness flickered briefly and was dismissed as pessimism. Those moments pass quickly. History does not wait for certainty. So the question remains, suspended without resolution, without instruction, without moral certainty. Are we sleeping too? Not because we are foolish, not because we are uninformed, but because we are busy, because life demands attention, because urgency is uncomfortable, because stability, even when hollow, feels safer than uncertainty. Rome understood all of this. That is why its story lingers, not as a warning carved in stone, but as a whisper that refuses to fade. A reminder that the most consequential shifts often arrive without announcement, without drama, without permission. They arrive disguised as normal days. There is no call to action here. No demand to wake up, no declaration of crisis. History rarely speaks that way. It prefers suggestion, implication, the slow accumulation of patterns that only become obvious when viewed from far enough away. Rome never had that distance. We might not either. So the story ends the way it began, quietly, without conclusions, without lessons spelled out, with a question left hanging in the dark, unanswered and unsettling in its simplicity. Rome slept very well, and history did not wake them.